You deserve it, Kayman. You deserve it.
Thank you, folks.
Next button. Weiter. Error. Noch einmal.
Hear it. Sorry. You don't understand what you're doing right now.
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam. We are starting Hilchos, Geneva, Prakim, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. Perek Aleph will lay out the basic definition of a ganef, which is not a gazlan. We're going to learn the specific aveda of the ganef. We're going to learn about the unique punishment given only to the ganef, which is not only must he or she pay back that which they stole, the keren, but they have to also, if they were caught by their geneva with Edom, pay back double. That's called kefil. And then there are times that they have to actually pay back 4 or even 5 times the amount of that which they stole. We're going to learn the rule that moide b'knas is pater. Big part of the perek will be about who owns the item that was stolen. You're going to think, of course, the owner. Of course, the owner. But there could be some sort of change that the item undergoes, which will make the ganef, the actual owner, even though he's going to owe the value. And all of that will be very much negeya in the scenarios where the item itself has a change in its value. Became more expensive, became less expensive. You cheshbin the kefil from the time of the geneva, from the time of when the guy was caught. And all of this is going to be a big part of the chapter. The bottom line will be that the Rambam holds that any shinui, even without Yush, Rambam Paskins, allows for the ganef to acquire the item proper. And there'll be many nafkaminas because of that statement. Let's start with the header. Yesh b'chlolan sheva mitzvahs, shtei mitzvahs aseh, v'chamish mitzvahs loisaseh, v'zeu pratam. Number 1, shaloy nigloy mamain. Now, mamain doesn't only mean geld. Mamain means anything of value. The law that the Torah gives regarding the ganef. Number 3, let's say to make sure that both one's scales and one's weights are accurate. Valid in the negative. Not to deceive people by using inaccurate measures and weights. Number 5, person should not even own 2 sets of weights or eifa 2 sets of measures. Owning meaning even though he's not using them for business. Imagine. Number 6, literally that means not to move someone's marker by making it all of a sudden appear like their property is smaller than it is. Number 7, unique halacha shaloi lignoiv nefashos, not to kidnap people. Perek Aleph, my friends, has 18 halachas beginning with halacha Aleph. Kol hagoynef mamin. If it has the value of a prita or more, then that person is over al loisasem. And it's important, the lav that the Rambam is quoting is not from what they call the 10 Commandments, which is a terrible translation. The loisig noivu in the Aseres Adibres is kidnapping people. The Rambam quotes the loisig noivu from Parshas Kadosh. Now, the ein loikin alav zeh, even if someone did violate it, why? Because the person is obligated to pay back. Okay, and actually, and by the way, first of all, the source for that, interestingly, who remembers in Parshas Mishpatim, you see a Gavaldik Hemshech, even though we're beginning with the din from Parshas Kedoshim. The Rambam say that doesn't follow the Seder of the Chumash, but we did come off Parshas Mishpatim. I mean, the whole Niskei Mamim, the bulk of it is in Parshas Mishpatim. In Parshas Mishpatim, The Torah writes, in Himatzei, Timatzei, Haganev, or Biyadei, Haganeva, Shnayim Yishalim. That's where the Torah writes specifically, not only regarding paying back the keren, paying back the double, but since you have to pay it back, so that's the rule that once it's called Eino Loiko Mishalim. The Torah says you have to pay back. Since Eino Loiko Umishalim, you're not going to get Malchus and have to pay back. The Echad Hagoyin Mamin Yisrael. This law is regardless from whom, from a Yid, a Yagon of Mamin, even if someone is mamish an idol worshiper, can't steal from them. The Echad Hagoyin of Esagadu, nor to steal from a cotton. Now, even though the Rambam began that the violation of the law is by Yeshava Pruta, halacha beis, also lignoif kol shehudin Torah, and this is consistent keshitas Rabbi Yochanan, like whom the Rambam paskins that chatzi shiur asur min haTorah. Another rule, the asur lignoif that it's choik. Just kidding, just for a joke. By lignoif even almanas lahachser, or even more. Look at the biggest, the best sinning l'shem shamayim. What's that? Reuven loves Shimon. Shimon needs money. Shimon is a proud person. Reuven has a chap. I'll steal. Make sure 2 people see. Steal 100. Then they'll catch me as a ganef. The Beis Din will paskin for me to pay back 200. And that was the kavanah. He wants to give Shimon a favor. Shimon doesn't want to accept it. He's doing it ba'if, and Shimon will have dignity. Reuven will be known to be a ganef. Who cares? Abi Shimon got helped. That is asur. Hakar lasu. Why shalo yargel atzmei bekach? There's a phenomenal story from the Baal Shem Tov. That's an Ein Kadamakim, where the Baal Shem Tov walked by the street. He stopped a person and he whispered something in his ears. And the whole story was the Baal Shem Tov, Ruach Kodshay, that person did such a geneva for the benefit of his friend. But then something happened and it was a lot of money. Then he decided to pay him back a little bit later. Then he decided so much money, he's not going to pay him back. He was about to move. The Baal Shem Tov told him, don't worry, give it back to him, he'll forgive you. Because you get used to it. Don't do it. Don't go down that road. What's the ganef? We know what ganeva means. You're taking what's not yours. Yeah, but there's different ways of doing it. And halachically, that will be of great significance. The key here is, I'm doing it in a hidden way. Hidden way means I don't want anyone to know what I'm doing. I'm hiding what I'm doing. For example, in Brazil, the mumches in this is called in English pickpocketing. They have a whole halachas, they have svarim, how to do it like this, how to do it like that. In contrast, you can say this guy is the worst guy in the world. That's not called a ganef, that's called a gazlan. And more than that, therefore, listen mezuyin sheganav, ain't a gazlan. That means sheganav, not shegazal. If a guy in the street, God forbid, Reuven holds up Shimon, that's called a gazlan. If Reuven is armed, he would be able to confront him, but he does it secretly. It's called a ganef. This was an act of geneva. This was taken from people not to know. And I'll tell you more than that. The Rambam is saying that even if Reuven holds up Shimon in private, that means Shimon knows who the guy is. But the fact that he did not do it in public is also called a ganef. And we'll see the big difference between ganef and gazlan is that a gazlan is chayv to pay back with gazlan ain't. But you don't have to get back kefil. A ganef many times will also be penalized. But
why the fact that he has a weapon does not make him a gazlan? The weapon has the intimidation.
It's very good. It's about did he do it in public or in private? Now, normally a ganef doesn't even want to be seen by the victim. The Rambam is adding in Allah Gimel, even if this ganef knows that the victim will know who he is. That's what he's saying. Normally you'll need a weapon. Why would the guy give it to you? But only the victim knows. Any act which is not done in public, let me say even better, any act which the thief is making an effort for people not to know, even if the victim knows, but he doesn't want other people to know. That's the pshat ganef. And that's the criticism. But from God, you're not afraid. From people, you are afraid. At least the gazlan, we're going against the will of God. Rahman al-Islam. At least he doesn't fear anyone. having fear of man, hiding from man, even though you know God knows, is considered a worser violation. Halacha Daled. Ganav shehidu alavim kshenim sheganav. Now, only by a ganav, another nuance, which is not such a nuance. If a person owns up that he stole, that's the rule. Moide biknas pater biknas. Not if I'm moide on pater to pay back the money. I'll steal money and I'll be moide. You don't pay the kefil. But if I didn't own it up, witnesses came. Chayv l'shalom shnayim l'balag neighbor. The Rambam specifies im ganav dinam l'shalom shnayim. Ganav chamoyre ksus oy gamol. The Rambam wants to emphasize, I don't have to give back 2 donkeys. I give back the donkey that I took, and I give back the value of the donkey. Shnayim bid domel, not the thing. No, it's not the thing that you have to give back to chafetzim. Nimtza. Now, what's the logic? Mida can I get mida? It's not stam a penalty in the belt. Everything makes sense. When Reuven took away from Shimon 100, what was he intending to do? He was doing something that would make Shimon out of pocket 100. What does the Torah do to Reuven? If he only gives back 100, Reuven is not out of a pocket 100. He simply gave back that which he got wrongfully. When he has to pay double, mamish, what he wanted to do to Shimon happens to him. Nimtza mafsid kashir shebikush lachasa eschaveri. Halacha hey. Gam if he was caught by Edem Kefil. But if he was Maida Mishalom, only the Kedem of the Menakefel. Shenemar, as it says, Parshas Mishpatim, Asher Yarshiun Elohim. We have to read it that way because this means a court. Then Yishalom Shnayim Le'eyu. He was found guilty by a court, meaning Veloy Hamarshias Atzma Mishalom Shnayim. And the Rambam adds, based on this, that watch, Hamoy the Bahan, you're parted from the Knas. And we already learned in Hilchas Niskimama, now the Rambam gave a very good klal, how to know what's called a knas and what's not a knas. And the Rambam writes, any type of fine that is not exactly that which you may damage, more or less. Remember, Chatzi Nezik is also knas, with the exception of Tzureiris. That's called a knas. Halacha ba. Tashlume kefel v'hagen b'koil. And however, if a person stole either a seh or a shoir, that's the exception. What's the pshat exception? Not that you don't pay kefil. That sometimes, Yakir, you pay a lot more than kefil. What would that be? Not always. And not only did he steal it, but then afterwards, either he shechted it or he sold it. Then, Mishalom alasem, 4 times the amount. That means the set was worth 100. He has to end up paying 400, or the set and 300, you end up paying 4 times. For Allah Shoyer, you end up paying 5 times. We learn chitas. We should learn chitas. Rashi quotes 2 Tanoim. I'll just quote the second one. That's one of the explanations. That a shoyer that does work for the owner. When Reuven stole Shimon shoyer, so he was mevatel melacha, so he has to pay more. Said no, they don't work. They have value. They get fatter. You can share them, but they don't do avoida. So only 4. No, that doesn't explain why 4. Why not 3? Why not 10? I know, but just the concept, some understanding of shoyer, greater penalty than seh, as we quoted the Rebbe Meir. Halacha. And in the case of a shoyer or a seh, now let's go into certain specifics. If it's a married woman that doesn't have how to pay, because even if a woman is independently wealthy, even a woman who has an income, under normal halachic circumstances, her husband is entitled to her wages. Her husband during the marriage is entitled to her property. So it's not she owes the money, but she doesn't halachically have money to pay. The Rambam is speaking about the kefil because the item itself you give back. The knas, she owes it. If she'll get divorced or if the husband will predecease her, then based in the Ephraim. Unlike a minor, a woman really can be a man who has no money. So Bezdin will take back the article. We're going to speak about that more later because sometimes even though the article belongs to the owner, we'll get to that. If they were kind of, no, they give back the article, and the kefil is a chayv on her. A minor halaches katan shiganav patam in a kefil. Now they take the item back. Pata min hagezel means that even when he becomes an adult, they won't take the money from him. And if he loses the item proper, that's very important. In other words, a katan is not a mechuyev b'davar. The eishes ish, or anyone who has no money, they're mechuyev. They don't have. So when they have, they pay. A katan is one of the three people, pigi yasana. They're not chayiv.
So the halacha side, it doesn't go to the hospital, right? Spending, waiting for.
Very good. The husband didn't steal, like the katan. The father didn't steal. The idea, we'll go back to the last series, the idea that my animal does damage and I have to pay is a chiddush. I didn't do it. I didn't guard it. Same thing you can argue with a katan. You didn't watch your kid. Ishteke gufay, not for this. Ishteke gufay, ultimate limit. Halacha tes. All right. However, shigana, patam in a kefel, same thing like an Eishes Ish, guys. This is important. The Eved is mechuyev mitzvahs, at least in most mitzvahs. In other words, the reason why he doesn't pay is because, you remember, kol masha kana Eved, kana rabbi, he doesn't have. Now also, ubalam peturin. She'ein adam chayv al niskei avadav, af al pi shehem amoinoi. See, it's even more. Like yad Eved ki yad rabbi. No. The pnei sheyesh bem das, and therefore you can't ve'enu yachal l'shamram. Why don't you watch over your family members? They have das. You can watch over yours because yours don't have das. I don't know. That's if they have independent. The animal has no das. Any other human being, they have das. You can't guarantee their shmita. And more than that, if a person would be chayiv to pay for the damage of his eved, the Rambam says, then there'll be chaos. What will be the chaos? Shema yachisenu rabbi. So what would the eved do? Yelech v'yadlik godish ve'elav dinar v'chayitz v'mishan zakim. Now, on the other hand, like the married woman, the Eved is chayiv. Elamah, he has no money. So therefore, the shtach no Eved. So then, chayiv l'shalom v'sakefel. Halacha yud. Ro lebeizin lahakis esektanam alaganei b'kfi koyach hakaton. In other words, this is behemshach to halacha ches. A cotton is exempt. Now, it's interesting, not that if ktanim are doing damage or stealing, that Beis Din will be maked their parents. We gave up on the parents. So when the Beis Din sees that a kid is not being parented, Beis Din shouldn't parent the kid. Try this in America. Beis Din has a minute to be market the ktanim. Kfi koyach hakotten. Kedei shelo regilum ba. V'chein meziko shaynesak. Also v'chein makanes avadam sheganvu. Oy shiziko makaraba. Kedei shelo regilum lahazik. All right. Halacha yud aleph. Now, let's start. This is the topic. What's the topic? I get the kefil part. What about the keren? So you give back the item. Hold on. Who owns the item? Halacha yudal. And while it is still in the hands of the ganav, the article's value increased. Now, Chevre, let's go read. Whoever has a chayenu, he gives a beautiful agama to the next many halachas. I'm reading footnote 6. When the article increases in value after the theft, the question is, what must the thief return? Is it sufficient for him to return the value of the original article? Right? When he stole it, it was worth 100. Give back 100. And kefil, give back 200. Or must he return the added value as well? The fundamental principle is, as long as the article is considered to belong to its owner, it and any increment must be returned to him. However, when the stolen article is acquired by the thief, then the thief is entitled to the increment. So the question is, when does the ganef acquire the article? So here we go. If there is a shinui, if vinishtanes, or if there's yush, remember, Rambam, the ganef owns it. And there's going to be consequence. Now let's go read inside. And this is very important. No effort was made by the Ganav. For example, he stole a kizva, a female shepselem, and either she gave birth, or male or female, and now the Ganav, while the Ganav before tshuva, he shore the hair off it.
Was she pregnant before he stole?
Yeah.
Before he stole.
Doesn't make a difference. Yes. Because if an animal that's pregnant, say, is worth 100, and if it gives successfully birth, then the mother and the child is worth 110.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what it was saying. So then the din is mishalim oisav es gizoisev es valdoiseha. That's not called a shinoi. This is natural that you give birth or even get. However, ve'im achar yehu shioldo gusasa. Guys, this is independent of the kefil. Whenever you have to return, you have to also add double. And economic. Let's go to the principle. Then mishalim kishas hageneva gewaldik. In other words, right now the sheep has a baby. How much was the sheep worth prior to it having a baby? It's worth a little bit less. That's the keren. And if there wasn't a moide b'knas, then double that. But it will be kishas hageneva. However, that is all if the ganef did not invest money. But if the ganef invested, for example, the ganef gave it the extra cholent. Now, harei hashvach shel haganef. Interestingly, even if the item belongs to the owner because there's no yush. Now, how do you cheshbon that? So 1 second, if there's no yush, yakir, then the animal has to be given to the owner. But the animal was worth 100. Because of the extra food that the Ganav gave, it's worth 110. So it's not, so he gives him back the animal. There's no huge. Now the owner owes him 10. 1 second. The Ganav owes Kefil. Kefil would have been another 100. Instead of giving 100, he gives 90. You deduct that from the Kefil. Either you get the money back, or like what I said, you just deduct. If there's no change, that's very important. No, it's guys, only affected Yakir that the Ganev gets to keep the change in value. Even la'achar yush, as long as the Geneva is be'en, the Ganev won't keep it. Elama, that if it's la'achar yush, then if it got an increase in value, the Ganef will get that value back. But remember that this is big yosoidus. When the item is be'en, the owner says, "I want my item back." In a case when it was after yush, the guy invested, "Alle gute Sachen will make the cheshbon." Nishtanas, that is when the Geneva guys you base did not change. What happens if there is a change? Not the change that we spoke about on Halacha Yud Aleph. That's natural. There was a change in the item. At Shinoi allows for the Ganef to acquire the item and to acquire the Shvach, even if there was no Yush. The Rambam holds that Shinoi without Yush makes the Ganef own it. And now, once the Ganef owns it, you make the Cheshbon from the time of the Geneva. And guys, Eladamim times two, and a Chanami. Yes.
Is there a time period for Yush?
No.
How do we know?
No Shinoi, and no Yush. 20 years pass, still yours. Someone took my tefillin here many years ago. I don't have Yush. Befedish. Halacha Yud Gimel. Ganaf Chushav Ishminam. Now, if a Ganef was stolen when it was very skinny, and the Ganef, gave it food, or the opposite, when he stole the animal was very fat, and now it got very lean. So what do we do? Mishalem tashlumi kefil, or even tashlumi abar v'chamisha kishas hageneva. Now, guys, there's opposite logics. I want to speak this out by heart. In the case where the Ganef made it fat, so we already learned that before. Like that was in the middle of Yud Aleph, right? If the Ganef invested money, the Ganef can say, I did a terrible sin. The animal is yours, but I made it fat. I get that difference. Now, the ikir is in the opposite direction. What's the opposite direction? If he stole it when it was fat, and now it got weak, right? So he cannot say, so 1 second, if he stole it when it was skinny, he made it skinny. What's the rule? That's the oisius aryakir. If a Ganef takes an animal and kills the animal, he has to give the worth of the animal, not the carcass. Mali kotla kula, mali kotla palga. Why should the owner lose money? You made it weak. Pay kishas hageneva. Now, a change that again happens naturally, And that is, if you remember, going back to Kachim, you have the same animals when they are within the first year, they're called like a kevis. Then when they go in their second year, they're called an ayol. Then you have a pada only begins in the third and the fourth year. What happens if it underwent that change of age, which halachically gives it another name? Gone after when it's young, and now it became an ayol. Or you stole the egel, a calf, and now it became a shoyt. Mishalem tashlume kefel kishas hageneva. Because, you know what, guys, don't forget again. I want to remind everyone. The item itself goes back to the owner. If there was, that's not called a shinui. Always that way. The item goes back to the owner.
Correct.
No shinui. Elama, the value is cheshbin for the kefil for the shas hageneva. Mishalem tashlume kefil. Furthermore, but only after shehigdil. Now, nasa shinui biyadoi. Now we consider to it have undergone a change, guys. Even though this is called a shinui, that's natural. If there was tavichol, it is a big yisoidus. It is a change. We consider, and therefore, change enough for us to say that the owner owned it, and therefore it's enough for him to say, I shechted my own, I sold my own, and he does not pay tashlumei bar v'chamish. To be consistent, if you pay kefil mishas hageneva, which is what the Rambam paskins, why mishas hageneva? Because it's a change. Now it's something else. So then at least consistently you'll be, you have to pay kefil, you'll be exempt. Halacha yudal gonav, you'll be exempt from bar v'chamish, even though tvachim v'chari. Gonav behema, this is mamash gaval. Oy kli v'chayoytze behen ubeshas hageneva hoyse shovar bo. There's something called deflation, not inflation, the opposite. The same thing, the item now is worth only 2. The din is mishalem keren kishas hageneva. The owner, the ganef yakir, cannot tell hareshon chalafonecha. No, the ganef says, if you, the victim says, if you would not have stolen it from me, I would have sold it. Pay me back the value of what it was worth then. However, guys, the tashlume kefil or the tashlume bar v'chamish kishas hamada b'din. Guys, these are the klalim. Everything has a reason. We have to move on. It's so important to spade it. Now, let's go in the opposite direction. Now, there's something called inflation. Now, it's worth 4. So like this. If any type of change was made, then we say mishalom tashlumi kefil or chamisha when kishas hamadas badin. Wow. In other words, it was not the negligence of the owner was not the cause of the loss. That's what the me'elav means. Then mishalom kefil kishas hageneva. In other words, guys, really, the chiyuv is only on the geneva. The premise will normally be the chiyuv I'm having is not because the animal died. It happened me'elav. He was not negligent. Whenever the chiyuv is because he stole, then normally you'll pay kishas hageneva. Amazing. And if no shinoi happened, other than shchito mechira, and the item was not changed, Yakir, in the second to last closing Yudalit. That is when you pay kishas hamadabadin. Halacha tezva. Now you broke it, okay? Not me'elav. If you remember in the last series, we had a very important rule that normally by nezikin, even though I was mazik, my animal was mazik, your animal was worth 200. The din is, Yakir, I don't give you 200 and keep the carcass. The victim has to deal with the carcass. The mazik only pays the difference, not by Geneva. By Geneva, like a person stole an article and they broke it. They don't get to give the pieces back to the owner and pay the difference. They pay everything to the victim because they were a ganav, which is worse here than being a mazik. Me should have killed and nishpa even if chas ma'el. Ein shamalei apchas. No, we don't say, like we say by damages, shaman l'nizakin. We don't say this here by Geneva. Elaroyin kamaho yeshava hakeli. Now, shava hakeli when yakel. Learn the previous dinim. Everything is there. Shasang Geneva, shasang badabadin. That value. Umeshalam leba'olim. That plus double. And the broken charge stays with the ganef. The hakeli yashava yoleganef. The chinkol kayoytze bozeh. Now, if the owners want to keep the broken parts and for the ganef only to pay the difference, okay. But that's something that the victim gets to determine. That's a huge difference between Geneva and Hezek. Gewaltig. Halacha Tzayin. Next. Hagoynet v'tavach emachal lifnei Yiyush haba'olim. Now, the Rambam is saying Yiyush haba'olim because if you remember, that Rambam already said that Yiyush makes it yours. Remember that. It means if Reuven is a ganef and Shimon has Yiyush, the owner has Yiyush, and then Reuven shechts, he's not chayiv daled v'hei because he shechted his own animal. So if there was no Yiyush, and v'harei hagidei v'chizeres ba'atzma miyad halokeyach harei ze mishalem tashlumei arba v'chamisha. And I'm sorry, I take that back. So what
are we saying?
We're saying that the din of Daled v'chamisha is whether there was yush, whether there was no yush. Clear. If there was a shinoi, that's what we learned before. That's if there was a shinoi. That's when it belongs to the ganef. Very good. To the point that tficha umechira, he won't be chayiv, but just Yush won't exempt him from Adal Bey. Halacha Yuzay. Going to figure out another thing. Afal Pishin is Yashu Haba Olim, which means ganef number one is now the owner. Never means potter never means potter from the cat. It means potter from the cave. And the im tavar chamachar eino mishalem chamish. Legane farish neino mishalem sharei din habehema hazois lachzer beinel laba olam beloy kana gane. And that's even after Yush. Like we said, when the thing is be'en, you give it back. Because he did not steal it from his rishus. The Torah says, "V'gunaf mi beiso ish, v'lo mi beis hagan." The final halacha yudches, gonav v'tovach, ubo ganav acher v'gonav. So listen, ganvit, he shechted it. That means the first ganav is already chayiv dalad v'hei, and then someone stole the meat from the ganav. Ganav acher, yeah, misham shul kevel ganav rishon. Because now that there is such a shinoi, now it's mamish belonging to the first ganef, and the first ganef has to pay tashlumei abba v'chamisha. Ganef umachar. Now there's no shinoi, right? There's no shinoi ma'isa here. There's only he sold it. Now it depends, because that's not called a shinoi. Im this yashu haba olim. Hanei Harishain is Mishal Mushlomi Abba Chamisha, because that's the din of Ganaf Umachar, even by Yush. And now the Lekeach, my friends, owns it. So now the Ganaf Hasheni Mishal Mushlomi Keif, because the Lekeach is like the new owner. Which means that what, my friends? Which means that the Lekeach's animal does not belong to the Lekeach. There was no Shinoi in the animal, there's no Yush. So that's the rule, that if you steal an object from the non-owner, you don't even pay kefil.
So wait, the first thief gets away with it completely? He doesn't get any punishment at all?
No, the first thief has to pay dalad dehei. The first thief was ganef u'macher. That was halacha Tzayin. One thing is important, good, that Rambam establishes that the din of dalad vehei has nothing to do with yush. Okay, very good. Pedig Beis now will give us all of the cases where one is exempt from paying dalad and hay. It's going to be a gavaldik Pedig. Pedig Beis has 18 halachas. All of the cases that you are exempt from kefil and from dalad and hay. Okay, that's the Perek base. Halacha aleph. Hagoynef es oivet kechavim. Now the Rambam began in the beginning that stealing even from an idol worshiper is asur min ha'Torah. But now we're going to speak about the penalty. Or if a person ganvis from hegdish, it's asur, it's alav. But einoi mishalem ela kenem ulvad. This punishment of kefil is not shaykh. Shenemar, the Torah says yishalem shnayim. The Torah adds the words lidei eyu, and the Torah Shemal Peh is megale. What does Hashem mean with lidei eyu? Lidei eyu means v'loy lehegdish. Lidei eyu v'loy lehegdish. It's not called tulamudim from the same pasuk. It's one limit. You only pay it lidei eyu. Even if it's still in the house of the owners, doesn't make a difference what level. Bein kachim kachim, bein kachim kalam. Right. Number 4. Bein kachim she'ein habu olam chayavim ba'achri yusan. Remember, nidava hareizu. Or if it was kachim that it came from a neder harei olai, and the owners are chayiv, makes no difference. It's not rei eyu. Harei is a potem in a kefil, and if the guy knocked, the guy went ahead and he did a tzvicha mechira. ומתשלומי 45 שנאמר וגונב ובייס האיש ולוי מבייס ההקדש ולוי מבייס ההקדש. Why do we need to have tulamud? Didn't we just say lidei eyu? Yeah, of course, because lidei eyu was by kefil, and now the Rambam is bringing another pasuk that exempts the dalad v'hei. Halacha beis chein hagoyin v'avodim or shtarois or karkais ain't mishal tashlumi kefil. Why? Shlechiva toida kefil el b'metaltalin that have value themselves. Shenamar, as it says, al shoir, al chamoin, al seh, al salma. Common denominator is that they all have intrinsic value. Avodim are hooked like karkais. It says on bahar vis nachaltem oisem, and the word nachla is normally only used by real estate. Shtarois ain't gufamamoin. Big question, right? Going back a few hundred years, how do we view bills? Well, it's coinage is kesef. The coins have some value, even though now not the value in silver. It's all fake today. Is a bill star a US dollar bill, or is a bill kesef? My nafkamina, pinyan. That's the question. Okay, right. Today the meaning is we don't give bills. We give coins, and not only give coins. We give coins that are made out of silver. So they have the real value of the old kesef. Kesef was called kesef because it was made out of kesef. Today you say kesef, it began copper, and then the kesef went to paper, greener paper. Halacha gimel. Hagoyin peter chamor shel chaveri kodim sheyipade. Oh, how do you view that? In other words, someone has a chamor. They are mechuyev either to exchange it on a seh and give it to the kohen, or to decapitate it. It's not theirs. Mishalom tashlumi kefil ba'olim. Afal pi she'enay achshav shaloi, aber roi lias leila achar sheyipader. Halacha dal. Hagoyin eftiv l'shachaveri v'choloi. Now, guys, remember, eating tevel, chayv misa b'dei shamayim. The rule is, if a person does a sin for which the chayv misa is based in, and the chayv money, who remembers, they don't get paid penalized money. But we don't say that by chayv misa b'dei shamayim. Now, hold on. Another din over here. The eating, which is when you're chayiv misa, and the geneva, the sin of the geneva, did not come at the same time. That would also be a key. Now, even in the areas where we don't get penalized twice, here you'll be chayiv. You understand? And I'll tell you more. Not only by misa b'dei shamayim. If a person stole chaylev and they ate it, that's chiyuv kares. Because the chiyuv, the geneva, you know when you're chayiv for the act of theft. Later you ate it. It's not to say it's not together. And by the way, this topic we're going to come back today, God willing, in Perek Shlishi, all about the rules of when one act brings upon it two different penalties. Where in many cases you won't be penalized twice. Here it's not even done at the same time. Halacha hey. Think about that. The Yid did not give it yet to the Kohen. We, as a Yisrael, we get to choose who to give it to. And sometimes we can get some tip for that. We cannot get tip from the Kohen, but if there's a Zayda that has an Einikel, that's a Kohen, a third party, it's called Toiva Sanah. Give it to my Einikel. Eina Mashal Joshua Kefil. Ella, they don't own it. The Toiva Sanah is not Mammon. Now, let me ask you a question. Who did they pay it to? Don't forget about the pay. Who did they pay the keren to? They give back the keren to the owner. And the owner gets to give it to whoever he was going to give it to. You give that back to the owner. Halacha. Just no, there's no case. Halacha vav. Hagoyin b'shal aviv. V'tovach umachar. And before you had the time to do tshuva, the father passed away. You have to pay tashlumei arba'am v'chamisha. Big chiddush. In other words, your guy has brothers. There's a debt owed to the estate. He's also part of the estate. But the chelik of the brothers from the Dalet Vehei has to be given to them. But if he stole it prior to shechting it, the father passed away. Then Tovachomachar, Mishalom Tashlumi Kefil, and he doesn't pay Abba Chamisham. Why is that? Because since B'Shas Hashchita, he already owned a chelik in the animal. And guys, Tficha and Mechida, we'll see a few times, that act has to be a full prohibited act. Chazal say it has to be an act that's kula be'isur. He had no right to do it because his brothers did not agree to that, but he also had some ownership. We'll see more about this concept for tficha mechida. The punishment is only when it was kula be'isur. Go now b'tavachomachar. What did we say from Hegdish? Now it's Hegdish to meet. Still, Mishal D'Shumei Abar V'Chamish. You can say Pshita, the Rambam is leading up, but the Im Higdish means a guy stole in a case where he acquired it, and now he's magdish it, and then Tavachomachar, even though he was magdish kachum kalim, which means that the magdish will eat the meat. So Mishalam Tashlumi Kefil because he stole it from a commoner. The act Mishas Genevet wasn't Hegdish, but then Mishalam Tashlumi Chamisha.
The brother.
No. This case, Higdish. No. New case. Yakir, you got it. Reuven stole Shimon's animal. Then Reuven, in the case where there was Yush, the case where he made a Shinoi, that's last chapter. In the case where now he's the owner, he's Magdash it. Then he shechts it. So for the Geneva, he has to pay kefil to the owner. There's no Dalet Vehei because you never paid Dalet Vehei to Hegdish. That was the Spedic. Not kefil, not Dalet Vehei is not paid. Right? We're going to the base Hagan, if we're going to base that you don't pay Dalet Vehei, Kishegdish Achar Yiyush. In other words, why is that? Because you had the koyach to be magda. It was yours. If it's not yours, it's not Hegdish. To the original owner. Halacha Zayin. Hegdishu haba. How great is that? In other words, let's go. Reuven stole from Shimon. Shimon said, "Oh, the guys took my animal. You know what, God? The animal belongs to Hegdish. But he did it when it was ready in the house of the Ganet, even though there was no Yush, even though there was no Shinoi, there's a rule. Einoi Kaddish. You can only be Magdash something that's under your Reshus, even though there was no Yush. It's a big rule. And therefore, since it's not Hegdish, let's go further. Not only is Reuven chayv to pay you kefil, but if Reuven goes ahead, if the Ganem goes ahead and he's tavachomachal, afilo acher hegdishim v'sham levarchamisha. Because now, if it's not Hegdish, it belongs to the owner. That's what the Torah says. Dalet Vehei. Halacha 8. Shoichet v'nesnablo b'yadoi. This is important. The nesablo doesn't mean that you discovered that the animal has a hole in the lung. That's called nitrafa b'yadoi. Nesablo means, if you remember, that there are 5 basic halachas of shchita, and whoever doesn't remember them should right away be demoted from being a shoichet. And one of those 5 did not happen. Okay? So, for example, shehiyah, however you define shehiyah, there was too much of a pause, which means it's not another, let's just a chazar, that even when an animal is treif, shechita removes its tumah. If there was no shechita here, it's Tommy as Nevela, or Bechlal, he ripped out the pipes, he poked, pierced it. Mishalem tashlumi kefil bilvad. In other words, when does the Torah say you have to pay dalet v'chamisha for shechita? That's bechlal not chod shechita. Now there's another kasha. That's a big sugya we learned together. If you remember, it's called the sugya of shechita she'ena ru'uya. In the beginning of halacha ches, it was not shechita. If you did a shechita, but the shechita was ineffective. For example, the animal is discovered to be a treifa. Rambam is going to paskin. Rambam paskins shechita she'ena ru'uya shma shechita. In this case, you'll have to be chayiv dalet vehei. Avlam shachat l'refuah. Shachat l'reshchua means you don't need to be kosher. It doesn't need to be kosher. Oy laklavim doesn't need to be kosher. You shechted it anyways. Or you made a shchita, but it's a treifa. Oy shechta ba'azara. Now guys, if you shecht something ba'azara, midrabanan, you can't even have hana. You don't need it, or you don't need it, or it didn't work. Still, the Rambam paskins mishalom toshom b'chamisha. I have a picture calling shukad ba'azara asur ba'na. Hoil v'isurim divrayim. Areza chayv l'shalom toshom b'chamisha. All of these in the second clause in Ches is called that's the sugya of shchita. She'ena ra'uya. The Rambam paskins shema shchita. Halacha nine v'chein hagoyin of kalayim. Abam and asavim min acher. So what's the klal, guys? Normally when the Torah says seh, I want you to know many times seh lohoitzi kalayim. Not over here. Here there's a limit. I forgot what the limit is. That not only is the din for seh oishod, right? It's also for a crossbreed, or the person stole an animal when it was already a treifa. But like we mentioned, that shechting a treifa takes away tumas nevela, so it's effective. It's not effective. It's more than it has some effect. Oi, a person stole an animal when the animal was already, it was a treifa, it was a kitas, it was a chageres, it was a suma. Or no more, guys. A person stole an animal that had more than one owner, the tavach or machar, in all of these cases, still mishalom toshom b'chamish. Halacha Donav the nasal achar b'matana. How great is that? They call that Robin Hood. People come to shul. They're good, not for them. They walk out with all of your food to give it to their wives, to be generous. They gave it to someone else. Or if he gave it to someone else to shech, and indeed it was geschachten. In other words, guys, machar means changed ownerships. It wasn't machar, it was a gift. Tavach means you shechted it. He didn't shecht it, he gave it to someone else to shecht. And indeed, or he stole it. The hikif means when you sell something, don't pay me now. Big knacket, he didn't pay for it himself. Pay me later. We want to know what that's called selling. Or ganat the hichlip. Hichlip means bartering. Selling normally means for kesef, not for kesef. I'm giving you this behemoth, and I want you to give me your watch. Ganav, and he owed a debt. Or he bought something before that he didn't pay for yet, and he used that for that payment. Or even better, he wanted to send a gift to a shvigid, but he's not going to go out of pocket, so he stole and he gave it to her. All of these cases, that's called mechira. Mechira means there was a change. Meshalom tashlom, and also that's called shchita, which is a big chiddush. In other words, normally you say ein shliach ledvar aveira. I sent someone else to shecht it. I have to pay the dalal v'chamisha. Halacha yudalev ganav u'machar. But aber, when he made a sale, he told the buyer, "You will only acquire it after 30 days." During those 30 days, they chapped him. How great is that? Only kefil. In other words, you only pay for the dalal day if the mechira is fine. Machroi. If he made a sale, but it wasn't absolute, he kept back for him a little part. What he kept for himself was something that you can only eat if it's geschachten. In other words, if I kept for myself the hair, that's not called holding back. But any part of the meat, because it's not a full sale. However, that you can eat the keren or use the keren even without shchita, then yeah, because they're not part of the animal that they only become mutter only through shchita. Halacha yud beis. I'll tell you better. You're telling me that I'm only chayiv, right? If I made a full sale, okay, I stole it. I cut the ganav cut off an aver, and then he sold not the aver, the rest. That's a doubt. What do you do with a doubt? On one hand, in other words, the question here in Allah is whether that's called shiur. If you leave over, Halacha Yud Gimel. Choravos loy ba shutves. He stole an animal that he already owned part. Then we say, this is mamish the case we learned of the guy that stole from his father, then his father passed away, then he stole it. He was a partner. So like we mentioned, these are the words. The mechira or the tficha has to be kula be'isur. If you own some of it, it wasn't kula be'isur. You have to pay. You have to pay kefil for the theft. You don't pay dalavei. Shutvim, shagon b'votavach echad mihem. Now it's different. Two people stole it. They were partners in crime, and one of them shechted it. One of them slaughtered it. If it was with the consent and knowledge of the other, then they both did it. Mishal min tashlim evavachamish. But both of them are exempt. They are chayv and kefil because utvachai. In other words, you didn't have both of them. If it's belonging to two, it's amazing. The act was kula be'isud, but he's not the full owner. Halacha tezvav gona ba'amad badin, and the dayanim told him, now there's two ways for a dayan to paskin. This is very important. There is a certain statement from the judges that are not considered a definitive ruling, even though it sounds so. You know what's not a definite ruling? When they tell a person, you're chayiv to give money. Chayavata. Guys, chayavata is not definite. This is a good lesson in communication. You know what a definite ruling is? Not chayavata. Say ten loy mashiganafta. Go and pay back. Chayavata is as if we're two nice yeshiva bachrim, we're debating a case. Am I chayiv? Am I not chayiv? When a guy's a ganev, they have to speak stronger than just telling him you're chayiv. They tell him, go and pay. Go and, when they tell him go and pay, Mashagan after, that's called a definitive ruling. And then this guy goes ahead and he shechts it and he sells it. It's amazing. He's pater. Why is that? I'll tell you. Because Dalad v'chamisha, guys, is only by a ganef, not by a gazlan. That we learned in the last chapter. Once based in Paskins, go and pay, everyone knows that's clear. If they're going to do anything other than that, that's called an act of gezela. It's terrible, but there's no dalad. But if based in tells him something that you might sound like a psak, it's not psak enough. I want to tell you, when it comes to hilchas isur v'heter, that's enough of psak. Kasher mutter, chayiv pater. But when a guy does an act of theft, you have to speak stronger to him. Not only bis mechuyev tzolin, you have to tell him we are paskening that you paid. Go and pay. Chayiv atalitaloi. Then he is chayiv to tell Shmuel Chamisha, because hoyel v'leichot chvadin olav. He's still called a ganef. He's not called a gazlan yet, even though he's chayiv to pay. Maybe you can argue, maybe it's better for a beis din to tell the guy chayiv atalitaloi, not to give him an out. Okay, halacha tazayin. Now, in other gavaldik dinim. So you have a ganef. The ganef stole, but he's still in the domain of the owner. Now we're going to have to go through some hilchis kinyanim as we'll go through right now. What's the status right then? At that moment, if they're caught, pater min hakefil, and more than that, v'chenim tavach hamach hasham b'reshusam pater. To be careful. In other words, hopefully the people that are learning Shloisha Prakim are not going to take a walk away. Oh, I know how to do it. Always, when you learn halachas, if a person is a ganef, they can find legal loopholes. The guy can go ahead and go to the house of the ganef, the victim, shech the deer, then take everything out, only chayv the keren. But that's only if they didn't lift it. Now we have to learn about hilchas kinyanim. No, it's normally meshichas kaina. You know what meshichas kaina? If I'm out of your reshus, if I'm in your reshus, I'm not, no, because the act of Geneva was not, I'm chayv to pay the keren. Always the keren. I didn't finalize the Geneva.
Probably even steal it. Is that what it is?
Damaging is last series, and damages you never chayv ke. We're not speaking about damages, we're speaking about stealing.
But the shechita, when they did it's not there's it's called just damage. That's
it's cool. Well, maybe you can categorize it as a damage.
why is it damage? You're making it food.
Yeah, you damaged it. Yeah, I would word it that way. Very good. But 1 second. But that's because you did not do a bona fide kinyan. You moved it. You're moving it with the shoes of that guy who's not giving it to you. It's not yours at all. But if you made hagbah of imik be agenebo, there's chamishum goynev. Even though for example, go after lemon adir. You're schlepping it out, and while you're schlepping it out, it dies. Then you're potted, guys. You're potted from the kefa. I'll make it clear. Like I like your wording, Rabbi Zajac. The mistake you called the mazik, not called the ganef yet. But if you lifted it, or you schlepped it out, but it left the domain of the owners. Now, guys, we're speaking about chayiv for kefa. Make it clear. Now you're chayiv because you're a ganef. Furthermore. How great is that? And I'm saying this in Chas v'Shalom. A ganef walks into your house. The ganef has a son. He has to make a pidyon aben. So the ganef says the kohen. He invites the kohen with him. I'll give you the 5 slave. The ganef in the house of the owner did meshicha, and he gave it to the kohen to fulfill pidyon aben, or to his Baal Chayv, or to a Shomer Chinam, or to a Shoyel, or to a Noiser Seicher, to whom he owed money. That guy doesn't know of anything. The guy to whom money was owed was given something. Then is Pater HaShomer, same rule in the case of a Shomer. Now, Higbia, Oishitzim Rishus Valamomeis, Chayv HaShomer, Oy Bal Chayv Shenitan Loi. Mipnei Shadayin Lo Yitzi Agan L'Pneshus HaBa'olim. Okay, Chaver, let's read footnote 12. Let's read footnote 12. The Maggid Mishnah explains that the Rambam is speaking about an instance in which the recipient knew, here's Dovi, that the thief stole the animal. Now, although generally a person who receives stolen property from a thief is not liable for the double payment, he knew the recipient, since the original thief did not even formally acquire a certain article, since he knew it's stolen property, he was the one that took it out, right? Then the shomer is chayiv, the kohen is chayiv. No, he was the one that did the act of theft. He was the one that did the act of theft. Halacha Yudzayin Chemavaited Hoya Ha'eder Bayad. You have a group of animals in a forest, and hikish es habehema. Hikish means when you want to get animals to move. For people who went to Kamgan Yisrael, you go horseback riding, you give a knack to animals. So we're speaking about what's Mashiach. You made the animal move. Utamana and then the thief made the animal move, and then he hit it. He pushed the animal. No, the owner should not find it. From then on, he's chayv b'tashlumei keif. Why? Because you're not to the shus haba'alim. The owners have right to take it to the yard to pasture, as we learned before. But it's not to the shus of the owners, and therefore meshicha is enough. Another detail in Kenyan, meshicha doesn't always mean begashmias. If I connect the animal and it caused the animal to move, that's called meshicha. No, it's bayar. That's why. That's the whole point. Again, the moment the ganef is koina, that's when everything kicks in. Final halacha yudches. Still there. The article is still in the reshus alone. The owner discovers the theft, and then after the owner knows the ganef removed it and he shechts it outside the reshus. What did we say before? That the moment the ganef removes it, from then on, he's chayiv in dalad and hay. Oy sheganav hoitzi chutz mirishusan the tavach umachar birishusan. And they brought it back. In both cases, so it's everything that we're learning. The exemptions is only because it was mamish birishusan without a kinyan. Birishusan with hagba'ah. Meshicha out, bringing it in, you will, the ganef has to pay dalad day. And now, my friends, we're going on to today's third chapter. He's going to pay the gimel. Here we go. So we already spoke on Bekitzer about a person stole Tevel or Chalev. So this is a big Yesodisdika chapter, at least a big part of it, not only related to Geneva. When I do one act that, God forbid, is violating different violations. So there's two klalim to remember. Many people use the words "kam leibe derabim," but let's break it down. There is an act for which there's a chiyuv misas based in and a financial. Like the Rambam will give examples. A person on Shabbos burns his fellow's gadish down. So he was mazik his money, and then he made a fire on Shabbos. The rule is that whenever that act has both of these types of chiyuvim, I'm only responsible for the misa, not for the money. Even if b'poil, I won't get misa and based in skila because it was b'shoigeg, or because there was no edim, or because of any other halacha. In other words, if it's shaykh in the world of misas based in, you'll never pay the money for it. Now, there's another rule. When a person does something for which the chayiv malkis and there's a chayiv mam, there we also say eino loike umeshalem, but that's only if you actually are getting malkis. If there's a halachic reason why there wasn't hasra, if I'm not going to get the malkis, I'm going to pay. So it's the umbrella that since it's shaykh to a greater punishment, you don't get the lower punishment. There is a difference between if the greater punishment is misas based in versus if it is malkis. That will be a big part of this chapter. The Rambam is also going to speak about two other things in this page. Number one, moide beknas. We said moide beknas pater. Really, moide kama beknas pater. What happens if I was moide to a geneva and then Adam came? And the third topic of this chapter will be in the few circumstances where because of a geneva someone is stole, which is the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim. Not the way people think. It's very limited. There are many qualifications needed for someone to be sold in a Beis Din in order for them to pay back the money that they owe. That will be the big three topics of this Perek. Perek Gimel has 17 halachas, halacha. Kfar biyarnu behilchas nara psula. That shekol ha'oisa aveir sheyesh bo the same act, guys, at the same time. That's very important. Avoin misas Beis Din, guys, not avoin misa b'dei shamayim, not avoin misas kodesh, misas Beis Din and vitashlumin. There's a big blanket rule that eina mishalim, even though the guy is a shoygeg, meaning even though in this case he won't get misas Beis Din. He won't have to pay. Another rule, and the Rambam wants to point out over here that they're not exactly the same. The other rule is that if Ois Aveda should have chayv malchus for the same act, you're chayv malchus. For that act, you also chayv tashlumin. Yeah, we know eino loiko mishalom, loike ve'ena mishalom, lefisha eino other loike mishalom. But for that, it's not only there. You taka have to get malchus. Lefikach ima yeshoigeg or loy hisrubai. In other words, if you won't get malchus, yes, pay off. That's gavaldik. Now, let's go begin breaking this down. That you are exempt. It was the same act. Or you're mechayev tashlumin umalchus bebas achas, but avolim neschayv tashlumin. And right afterwards, you're neschayv misas based in malchus, as the Rambam will give examples, or in the other seder. No, it's this moment you're chayiv malchus, or this moment misas based in, and then connected to the sin, but not at this moment. Then you'll be chayiv tashlumim. Yes, loike umeshalem umeis. See the seder of the Rambam. You can't go on the other seder because you don't kill him and then give him malchus. You're not doing anything. First, you don't loike. Umeshalem, why not Meshalem v'loiko meis?
But if Meshalem, he doesn't need to get bitten for it.
Sure, no. The Rambam is saying he wasn't bebasachas. Maybe the guy, if you're going to ask money, he'll run away. Malchus, maybe, I don't know. Halacha beis. Ketzad, for example. Zorak chetz b'Shabbos. And what's the issur over here? Mitchilas arba l'soif arba.
Here it says like Mishalem. It's either like a Mishalem or Mishalem Ames. The two scenarios.
I know, and I know that. So it's either Loiko Mishalem or Mishalem. That's why I put it in the middle. Fakir, because the Rambam gave two examples. We're either speaking about Meshalom Umeis or Meshalom Umalka. Okay, good. That's the answer. Thank you. Now, guys, that act is halacha l'moshe Sinai. That's called carrying. And while it was traveling, it ripped through someone else's beged. You understand? No, it's the act that's mechayiv, the arrow shooter, skila. If it was done b'mezid, that act is a mazik. Or shehidlik gadush chavere b'Shabbos. A simple example. But hold on, guys. What did we just learn from the previous chapter? If Reuven goes into Shimon's property and he picks up Shimon's kiss, he was koined. He did the act of Geneva. But if he's doing Mashiach, what did we learn in the previous chapter? Well, if I do Mashiach in your domain, when did I acquire it? When it was removed from your domain. You know what happens when I removed your wallet from your domain? I'm also doing an act of Haitzah. No, these are all cases where Babasachas. And the Ibdoisham, Hareza Patim and Atashlumen, the Rambam is adding the Ibdoisham. You know, I'll tell you why the Ibdoisham. Guys, when we say that if I do an act, if Reuven does an act, God forbid, for which is chayv, misas bezdin, and money, you don't kill him and pay. Never pays. If the item is be'en, you take it back. The item is be'en, you take it back. But he should keep it. Abadana. That's where the Rambam adds. But the problem is that the item now is lost. So now the Ganev is chayiv to pay the value of the item. That's where we say no. And we say that even if it was b'shoigeg, because she is a Shabbos ve'isa geneva, and the hezit boim ka'achas avol and Ganev kit b'Shabbos. But what did he do? Again, going back to the last chapter, he did a halachically valid act of kinyan even in the reshus of the original owner, which is Hagba'ah, V'higbiyah, Shom Reshus HaYachid. So that's the act of Geneva. And then he walked out with it. But then he threw it into the Nar. Oh, Chayv L'Sham, there's only Kefal. Shalem is Chayv Yisru Geneva, Koidim she's Chayv Yisru Skila. Chen Chol Chayotze Bozem. Chen, another example, Im Kotzatz Ilan Chavere B'Yem Tov. V'hisru Boy, now guys, Yom Tiv is Malkus. Malkus, not Misa. And by Malkus, we say you actually need to get Malkus. So he cut down and there was Hasra. Now that means that act, because there was Hasra and Edim, you're going to get Malkus. That act is a mazik. You're not going to pay. Ein loike u'mashalim. Like I said, Yom Kippurim, even Yom Kippur, guys. I know Yom Kippur is Shabbos Shabbosim, Chiyuv Kares, therefore Malkus, no Misas Bezdin. Skill is only for Shabbos Shabbos. That's why the Hisru boy, here you need Hasra. Not like before, by Shabbos, you don't need Hasra. You can be a Shoigeg. Here you need to get Malkus. Or if you shechted on Yom Kippur, the Hisru boy, now put them in Atashlumen. But if there was no Hasra, even though it's a sin for which you could have been Chayiv Malkus, if you won't get the Malkus, Chayiv Atashlumen. Why? Because there is no Malkus. Halacha Gimel. Gone after Tavach b'Shabbos. Or Lavei Dezaram. Afilu b'Shgagam. Because that's already a chiyuv based in, right? Avodah Zarah is a misas based in. Like Shabbos. Not mine. I'm only the borrower. Now that's another example where boim ka'achas. Because Pater Afmen HaKefel, Shrei Isa Shabbos ve'Isa Geneva boim ka'achas. Ve'im ein Geneva ein tevicha mechili. He wants to point out that who spoke about Geneva, of course. The punishment that we learned in the now Perek Aleph, Perek Beis about Dalet Vehei is because prior to the tevicha there was Geneva. The Geneva happened through shechting it. You're pater from Tashlumin altogether because you're chayiv because you were violated Shabbos. Halachei. Gonav shomacher b'Shabbos. A ganav that sold something on Shabbos, or he sold something to a avodah zarah chayiv l'sham chamisha because she'ein b'machira misom. Very important. You should know that selling something on Shabbos is only asur midrabanan. Selling is asur midrabanan. By Shema Yichtoy, people get shocked with that. Actually, there's sometimes that certain transactions can even happen. The whole issue is isur d'Rabbanan, and selling to an avodah zarah is also asur midrabanan. But midoraisa, you didn't do a isur that you chayiv skila for. Chlal. Chai b'tashlumin. Im nasas malacha b'Shabbos beis hamechira, then potem in tashlumin da'abar v'chamish. For example, shelo hiknu loy acha tunuch b'chatzar alikeya. He said that. Shenimsa kishoytzi b'reshus l'reshus isur Shabbos umechira boin ka'achas. Similar to what we had on the previous chapter. If I make an act of sale and I make a condition, my condition is binding. So if my condition was that you should only acquire it when it goes into your chutzah, that's when you had a hoitzah mireshus harabim l'reshus hayach. The point is, b'bas achas you are exempt. Not b'bas achas, you're always chayiv both. Halacha both. Also shliach lishchet loy and v'shachal shliach b'Shabbos. How about that? Who's chayiv misa, my friends? Who's chayiv misa? The shoichet was machal Shabbos. Now, I want you to know, we mentioned this in the previous chapter. Ein shliach ledvar aveiro. But remember the case of sending it through a shliach? Le'inyan tashlume daled vehei, my friends. We learned that in the last chapter. If Reuven steals an animal and he asks someone else to shecht it, he has to pay daled vehei. But for Hilchas Shabbos, ein shliach ledvar aveiro. So it works. Hadei haganav chay b'tashlume chamish. Shadei zeh haganav le'yoseh avim misas bezdin. You can argue he didn't do the shechita. No, we learned in the last chapter. Or if I sell it through a shliach, I'm also moicher. I'm chayv b'tashlumin. Halacha zay hoya shnayim idam sheganav ben shehidu heinatzmam shetavach imachad. The same witnesses said both. Or you had two different sets of witnesses. Ben shehidu achenu shetavach imachad. In all of these cases, mishalam tashlumei daled vehei hoyu shnayim idam sheganav. So that we have. So kefil your chayv. And only the Eidechad Meir Shetavachimachar or Shahoy Damatz May Shetavachimachar Mishamtushim Kefil They Mishamtushim Al Vehei because of the cloud that we already spoke out. Shamoyde Baknas Potter. Or maybe you can make Shamoyde Kama. I think that's better reading. Baknas Potter. Yeah, but for the Kefil you had to wait. For the Dalad Vehei you didn't have enough. You had to do a satz. Halacha hey, halacha ches. Now let's begin. So that's the yesod. And after he was moide, bo edem. Im hoide batchila b'fnei bezdin, ube bezdin. If he was moide to the bezdin that what? That he stole while bezdin was in session. That's what it means. B'fnei while they were. That's the real act of moide. Then you are potter. But abed. Or even if he was moide in front of two of the judges, let me see, didn't do a proper act of hoida of Kate, for example, that's what we're saying. Now understand something. Part of it is because his hoida was machayev. In this case, that's you have to underline that. We're going to learn other cases where his chaydo was not b'chayvim anything. Later, if Adam come, he will have to pay. Here, a normal act of Eidah, he has to pay keren. Shechiv atzma bekeren. And another thing, if I'm moida outside Bezdin, I don't own the keren. If declarations that people make out of Bezdin, we learned that so many times. It can be cruel. The guy is a liar. He can always claim, "I did it to instigate you. I was making a joke to you. I wanted to confuse you, not to know what I'm really claiming." Okay, you made a hoida, and now you're chayiv to pay your patam and akefo. But if the guy says loy go nafti, step number one, an Adam Khan that he stole. So where are we up to now? He has to pay what? What does he have to pay, my friends? The keren and kefo. Then now he says tovachti yomacharti. Now let me ask you something. What did that choidah accomplish? Once I'm already chayv as a ganav to pay not only the keren and the kefil, when I'm tavachti or macharti is only knas. My choidah was not chayv me at all. Now, by the way, I'm not chayv yet. But now Eidim come, yes, so the Rambam differentiates. It depends. If my hoidah was machayiv me in something, then I'm so exempt from the kefil, even if Adam come later. If my hoidah was not machayiv me anything, I don't have to pay Dalet V'Hei based on my own testimony, but if Eidim come later, then I have to pay. That's amazing.
Why did the can't put their final so it was so obvious, like 100 people were there? So then obviously it's more.
In other words, why don't we say that's the whole sugya in the Gemara? This guy was Maida because he thought to himself, listen, I'm going to get caught anyway. I might as well.
He's a guy. Why would he
No. That was
we
we learned in the Gemara. We learned about that. That Rambam doesn't make such a difference. Maybe he makes a difference in another place. That leave that a question mark. Could be there's a rule. Maida. Maybe there's a case where the Eidim are already in court. The Eidim are there already. In other words, let me use the logic of halacha test. That's really why you're asking the question. Oh, it's if the act of chida'ah is not being machayev me, I know that. Okay, halacha yud. Hagoyin et shal shnei shutvim and utvachim macharoi. Now, by the way, if one ganav did it, he has to pay Dalet V'Hei. Now listen to what happened. How great is that? What happens when there was no Eidim even on the Geneva? He was Moida to one partner. And you know what this guy did? And he denied the other partner. You know what happened right now? He's chayiv to pay the keren, half of the keren. It works that way. And then Eidim comes, the shalom is Zeshakafa boy. Chamisha chatzoi boker v'abo chatzoi seh. And to the guy that he was moide, he only pays half of the keren. So when you remember, the Gemara says Dalet V'Hei v'loy Gimel v'Dalet. You're right, but Dalet V'Hei does not exclude if it's two partners to each one their share of the Dalet V'Hei. It's shaykh to be putter to one and be chayiv to the other. Halacha Yudal. Din Haganef l'shalom hakenem hakevel l'shamayim chamisha. From where do you take the payment? It comes from his metaltalin, very much like a mazik. If you remember, even though we learned, I know that even atam. What did we say by atam, Yakir? It's only migufay. First, you ask metaltalin. If the guy doesn't have metaltalin, that's when you're going. Same thing by Yagana. First, you ask for the metaltalin. Elama, if the guy doesn't have metaltalin, he says he doesn't have or he's not giving. Based in Yargul and Achasa, by a mazik, right? By a tam. So we learned migufay. By muad yafasha ben achasim. By a ganef yafasha ben achasim. The goyven akom and yafasha ben achasim. Kisharan izakim. Shenema bahen. Just like there it says meitiv sadeo meitiv karma yishalim. The zelda zach is with a ganef now. The im ein like karka. Now we're opening up the final topic of this chapter, and it's amazing. It's how lucky are we to have the Rambam. How many times did we learn? We learn chitas, right? We know the general concept that if a person steals and he says Eloi, he's being sold. We're going to learn now that Rambam compiles from the whole Torah Shabbat Pen, gives us on a golden platter that in 5 minutes we're going to learn the din properly. People are familiar. Look how many qualifications you're going to have in this din. But not metaltal, not karka. Then there is a concept, not always applied, that Beis Din will sell him. As what? As an evidivri. And not, guys, not to the victim. He's being sold on the slave market. And the money is going to be given to the nizak. And that's the meaning of mishpatim. Now let's limit this. Halacha Yud Beis. First of all, this machlal is it's gender related. Only a man is sold b'greva sevaloyo ish. Vushtétos not beferish mipiakabal. Number two, another klal. You only sell to compensate the victim for the keren. After we learn 2 chapters, there's sometimes kefil, sometimes dalad. That you never sell to cover that. Hey, aval kefil. I'm not saying that he's exempt. Halacha Yud Gimel. And yeah, we began halacha Pedic Aleph, halacha Aleph. The Isur Midoy Raisa is from anyone. Nevertheless, for that you don't sell. Look at all these limitations. Halacha Yudal. Now halka Choya Hakeren Hagneva Meir. The Ganev was only worth 50 in that direction. And I want to add another thing. I don't know why the Rambam doesn't write it here explicitly. He's only sold for 6 years. It goes per year. on the 7th year, not Shemitah, on the 7th year, unless he goes to the next step that we'll learn about the piercing of the ear, he's automatically free. So you sell him for 6 years to cover the keren. So if he doesn't cover the keren, I want to speak it out by heart, you still sell him. At least the victim gets some. What happens if his value is 1 pruta more than the keren? You don't sell him at all. These are the basics. Let's read it inside. If it's less than the keren, you sell him. He's only worth 50. He owes another 50. The hashar and the kefil, all of chayv achiyetze bashvis, and the yasher v'yishalom. Ho yahagan of shava meya ve'echad, and the keren is meya. You sell him for 6 years. You know what his market value is? 101. Ain't an imkar. You don't say sell him. Give 100 to the victim and give him the one. No, because the nimkar bignei vasai. Achiyah dam of kulan muvloim bignei vasai. And here, damav is more than his geneva, the keren. I wish they taught me this in Cheder. These are basics because you live many years. Now, can you sell a person more than once? Let's go weiter. Ganav and imkar. So it depends. If he stole from someone else, for every victim you sold once, it's a new victim. You sold again. This genius, because he's living 700 years, or 600 years. Yeah, but if he stole from the same victim, Ella Yishor Olav Hakol Chayv. Halacha Tazayin. Gonav Lezeh. The Chaz are Gonav Lezeh. The Chaz are Gonav Lezeh. Before he was caught, 3 different people. What did we also say? That if his value is less than what he owes, he sold. It's going to be less. How do you divide it? Not the one who got stolen first is dealt with first. Together. Kulam shutfam boy. It's like this. Which is great. It can never be more. Can never be more. That's perfect. But or less minakeren. So the word is nimkar machalkim name. Machalkim name. No, it's by other chayvus. It doesn't go that way. If I'm a bal chayv and I have, let's say, karka lien, then we have to say to whom did I owe money first? Doesn't work that way. Ushar hakefala is chayval. But if, now again, this din that we learned in Halacha Yudalid, which is amazing, that if he's worth even 1 penny more, but here 1 penny more means not more than 1 geneva, all 3 together. It's going to make this very unlikely, unless he stole very little. You put all together because it's a shutfis. He owes 4 geneva $500. If he's worth 501, and the final halacha in today's Perek, halacha Yud Zayin. Now let's go in the other direction. 2 guys are ganavim. The word mishalshalin doesn't mean thirds, just to know it means divided. Whenever there's a liability that's divided, that's called mishalshalin b'neim. Now let's go to the same thing. So you go to their metaltalin. Let's go to the rules. If one guy doesn't have metaltalin, you take his chelim. If 2 people stole $100. Yeah. And let's say kefil, fine. So they collectively own 200. Each one pays 100. Go to their estate. They don't have a metaltalin. Go to the karka. They don't have karka. Ein loy. So then the din is kol echad mehem nimkar b'chelka min hakeren. And each one is viewed separately. Which is amazing. Which means like this: these 2 ganavim, they owe from their kenen. They owe together $100,000. So we're saying each one owes 50. One ganev in the slave market is worth 25. He's an altayid. He sold because it covers some of the other guy's young. The other guy's worth 51,000. Which each one is, that guy won't be sold because of the rule that if the ganev's value is 1 pruta more than the keren, you don't even sell him. To be continued.